jump into the next one. What do you foresee as the future for women in healthcare?
May I just come in and say my bit, because I just need to go at 1:45. Is that all right, Pam?
Yes, that's okay.
Yes, that's all right.
So I just think, from my point of view, women have what it takes to be there for the long haul. The whole thing of you strike a woman, you strike a rock, it's true. Women have the heart, and once they've got that, they don't give up. So I see the future for women in healthcare as being extremely important, investing in women, investing in young girls, in mentoring. I think women mentoring women. I think Foresee is a fantastic opportunity to do that. And I think one of the things is with women to be authentic and keep doing what you feel is right. So following your heart, but not forgetting that you have to fit in. But it's definitely a woman's role to keep going against all odds, as we've seen so often with mothers and grannies, how they just manage. So I think, women are there, and we must support them to stay there. Thanks.
Thanks, Pam. It's Jenny. I think women are very good at nurturing, and so they look at the big picture. When you're raising a child, you know that what you're investing in, you're not going to see immediately, and there's a sort of a longer term strategy almost. And I think women are good at seeing that and realizing that when we're building healthcare, it's Marika said, it's not just about medical guidelines. It's a lot about social determinants of health and looking at water and sanitation and women's health. And so I think that's invaluable to a community. I think what women bring is ability to long-term workers. We marathon runners, we're not sprinters, and I always say when you feel as if you've achieved something, it's actually just a water table along this marathon. So going and working at things and so making sure that there's good, strong foundations for plans that you build on top, and that's something to develop. I think we want to start highlighting the cues. I think that's something that's not addressing enough. And when you think that up to a third of communities are suffering from mental health, and a lot of that is tied up with poverty and food security. And so I think we need to start looking broader and being concerned and realizing that it's not just about taking your hypertensive medicines or having a viral load that's suppressed, but it's a lot more about the mental health, domestic violence, where the next lot of food is coming from, employment. So I think that's something that we need to start addressing. I think also women need support in raising children, and often women are left to do that on their own, both financially and just input. And so I think that also we need to support that. The thing that I think about women in rural health care is we need to have a more flexible work approach. So when women are perhaps breastfeeding or when they're raising young children, I think we need to have different packages of work options. So a woman can spend time with family, maybe when the children are small, or as Lungi said, there might be options for homeschooling. And I think in some of the rural hospitals, people are quite creative in sharing posts and things, but I think a woman should have that option, depending on the state of her family. Because at the end of the day, you get you really benefit from having that woman as part of your team. And so I think we're very narrow in how we view work. We view work as X hours to this time, over time, but I think we need to be more flexible to basically cover the hours, but allow a lot more flexibility in how that is done, to realize that as Melinda said, women play a very big role in raising children, and that's important. Don't invest in our children and in our families, then our community is going to suffer. And I think as health professionals, we need to take the lead in that, and we can't neglect our children and our families because we're so busy doing healthcare to those outside. And so I think we need to try and get that balance right, and we need to be advocates to politicians and managers, and it's not just for doctors and physios and OTs. I think it's across the cage, and sometimes in hospitals they can have on-site creches or on-site facilities where you can go and breastfeed your child during the day or things like that. So I think we need to bring a lot more to some of those issues.
Jenny, I fully agree with what you've just said. I think that our systems do need to be flexible. And whenever I think of a woman, my mind just defaults onto Proverbs 31. And what I'm amazed by is how much that woman is able to do in one day. So she is a business owner. She is a mentor. She mentors the woman in her neighborhood. She looks after her children. She's a nurturer. She looks after her husband, and she worships the ground that he walks on. And as a result, he ends up being worshipped in the community as well. But she also doesn't stop there. She goes to faraway places to get fine material. And I think, to me, what is just amazing is that she's still able to dress in purple, which is a sign, or which is a color of royalty. So in other words, this is a woman who's all-rounded, and I think that women in healthcare can be just that. And it's not just women in healthcare, but it's women in all spheres and in all other careers as well. If we are provided a footing where we can be propelled, we can do amazing things. And I think for me, it is very then important to mention the Femmes Down syndrome that unfortunately a whole lot of women suffer from. So especially I think in our culture, when you see a woman who's successful, you sort of default into wanting to destroy them or being jealous of what they have or have achieved, or not wanting to support them. And I think going back to that woman in Proverbs 31 is the fact that she actually shares her skills. So I think personally, I have actually observed the Femmes Down syndrome even in healthcare workers, where a healthcare worker will refuse to share her skills with others, refuse to be there for others when they need them. Because if my child, for instance, is sick and I need to go urgently, you will find that other women actually refuse to allow those mothers to be released from work to go look after their families. I think that we need to be supporting a much more lenient working environment, a much more flexible working environment, but at the same time, going back to that, what is your identity as an individual? Do you want to be a woman who is constantly going to be pulling other people down, or you want to be the kind of woman who will be building others up. And I think this is very important, especially for the youngsters that are still coming up as professionals. I think choosing to be supportive to other youngsters, and for me, that has been my goal. I would say that youngsters have been very important because they must be invested in all. Thank you.
I'm just keeping notes of the time, and I know that Dr. Pam has to go. So before we release her, Dr. Pam, do you have any closing remarks that you'd like to add to this conversation?
Yeah, I actually just typed them into the chat show, the chat meeting chat. I just say advice for young women of today: to be who you are, to believe in yourself, to keep on developing self-respect in yourself and in others. Identify what your strengths are and focus on what you see as the needs in the community that you can contribute towards. So basically, you can't do everything, but you can do something, and every little bit is going to make a difference. It's a long journey, destination unknown. You have to have faith, courage, and in the words of Anne Frank, the last words she wrote in her diary before she was taken away by the Gestapo to the concentration camp with family was she said, "Have courage and be kind." And I think those are the words that I would like to leave for women because those are really characteristics of women: kindness and courage. Thank you so much. It's been an absolute privilege being with you. Sorry I have to go. Bye-bye.
It's okay. Thank you so much, Dr. Pam.
Okay, let me just begin. I think women are very tough and empathetic in nature, and really, we know that system is dominated by women. But when you put a woman in a leadership role, they take the organization so far because they're able to think out of the box and they do not limit their functioning in their job. And so I really foresee the women in future as game changers in the healthcare system. Women are already investing in the system. They are already in policymakers. And one of the strengths of women is that in nature, they are role models to the younger generation. So as the children, they grow, they groom them and produce leaders later. And women are innovative and they are able actually to improvise, against the odds. And they're very good in shaping and strengthening the health system. I think if they are given an opportunity, they grab it and they use it and they don't look back. Thanks.
Maraika, are you still with us?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I've followed what the others have said, and I agree. I think for me, it would be the fact that we need to drive the vision of the bigger picture and advocate for change. So that narrow medical model approach, it's a terrible waste of resources and it's bound to fail. So if you don't see health within the broader environmental and socioeconomic context, we're not going to shift our health outcomes. And I think as women, we can multitask, we can think laterally, we can think out the box, we can build networks, we can build bridges, and we're not really good at operating in silos. So I think we're well pitched.
Thank you so much, Mareka. So I think we're just going to move on to our next question, and it's open to everyone. How have you learned to cope during the pandemic while also looking after your patients?
Maybe I should start. For me, as much as we suffered emotionally and physically during the pandemic, there were also some positive gains. Personally, I have developed in terms of personal growth, and actually, I even identified the strengths that I didn't know that I had during this pandemic. I've learned how I coped. I've learned to build up support system for myself and others, and I also seek professional help as well, because really I realized that I should stop to think that I'm a superwoman who can do everything. I had to learn to set boundaries and not to act as a superwoman. For me, the most challenging thing during this pandemic was finding that balance as a single mother, and also the demand. There was high demand from the system of me and attending to the community. Actually, I always laugh at this. They made my phone a call center to respond in all the COVID questions. So my phone constantly, I'm not joking, it was ringing all the time. And I would look at my child and I would see that is yearning to have that love, is yearning to have the mother. But the mother wasn't available, was there for the community. And getting used, myself always coming home first thing, even after a hard day, I'll get that hug and that gives me strength from my child. Now everything has to change around. You come home, you have to go and bath, and it was a whole change and emotional toil on me. But I learned to cope. I think the networking and being there for others and hearing other people and that support really has made me to be more resilient and to be actually a better person during this time. Thanks.
It's Jenny. I think, yeah, what Nomlindo said, the demand has been quite incredible. And I think I've really realized that I do need to spend time with my family, even if it's just, a few quality moments here and there. I've got a daughter matric this year, which has been quite demanding for her. And so I think I've had to try and make time and not feel guilty when I do that, because the days have been very long. I think the other thing that I've realized is there have been so many opportunities to connect with other organizations and people. We've had the privilege of having, virtual webinars and connecting with people overseas, but it's also been quite intrusive. And in a week you can sometimes have, almost every night there's a webinar, and I've used the term that we've all a bit webinared out. And so I think, like Nomlinda said, I've had to learn to set boundaries. And when you've done a 12-hour day, to say, although this webinar looks really interesting, it's actually and it's a boundary. I'm not going to connect to it, or I'm not going to participate. And I think that's taken a bit of courage, because I really enjoy those interactions and learning more. But I think it's been important to have that boundary. And I think that's come through the sort of pandemic. I think the other thing that I've realized is the need just to take time out. I've tried to do a bit of exercise here and there. It's been quite cold where we East London Womxn, so when it gets sort of less than 15 degrees, we all kind of feel the cold. But found it important to try and find time to exercise, to make sure you eat healthily, to get some sleep. And I think that's also been a way. It's also been something I've sort of not being great at all the time, but I've really tried to do. And then I think the other thing is the need to have good facts at your fingertips. There's been so much on social media, and I think I've tried to avoid reading absolutely everything. You get a bit bombarded, but to find good sources of information and then to be able to disseminate that. And I think that's what's needed some, we've almost had to learn how to communicate scientific facts with the lay public, with our patients, with other healthcare workers. I think we do things very differently in future. I think, as Marika said a few times, we tend to come with a very sort of biomedical approach to disease, and we come with our guidelines, and we don't really interact with people. And I think that's what I've learned is you need to have a chance to debrief. You need to walk into a ward and chat to the nurses and find out how things are going and how they're doing, and there you hear the story. And it's only when you hear the story that you can start to understand perhaps the fears, or maybe the actions or reactions to certain incidences. So I think I've tried to realize I need to listen more and not react in a particular way, and hear the story of patients and of healthcare workers, and allow people to debrief. And right at the beginning of the pandemic, there was a webinar that I logged onto, and someone said fear produces irrational behaviors. And as soon as you see a behavior that you can't understand, you need to now try and understand the fear or the emotion that it's arising from. And that's been very, very helpful. And I think, even now, perhaps we would have done things differently if we had a more of a psychosocial approach to this pandemic.
Okay, so for Lungi, I think for me, more is really just focusing on the positives. So when I talk about COVID-19, I have mostly one word in mind, which is reset. I think that a number of things are being reset during this time. With the lockdown, having to spend more time with our families, having to close the churches, so we're not parading in our churches, but rather having a more meaningful spiritual relationship with our Maker. And then just, I think for us, being in Umseleni, most of the, provincial meetings, it will mean that traveling 4 hours and 8 hours return trip just for a 3-hour meeting in Durban. But now with COVID, we've had to reset onto virtual platforms. And that means that I can now attend a meeting in the comfort of my home, and I don't have to spend all that time on the road, and I can then trade it in to spend it with my family. So there's a number of positives for me, but on top of that, I've had to, it's been quite a demanding time with having to be on the phone all the time. But what I've also then discovered is that I can be a support for other people as well. What I've been doing is I've been trying to support all our staff members that have been diagnosed with COVID-19. And a lot of them have complained that, but their supervisors are not doing anything. They love them when they're working, so they're not checking on them when they're ill. So I think just providing that for me has been really, really amazing. Just being there for the others and being a shoulder for them to cry on. And I think then also looking at rural healthcare, most of the time we do not have proper equipment to render certain services. And I think with COVID-19, we've suddenly had a call to order the equipment that we need. So for us, that's another positive. So looking at the positives rather than the negatives for me has really, brought it home for me. And I think for me, what was even more challenging was that during this time, our medical manager left. So I had to quickly adapt into the new role of acting medical manager with the unending meetings and the extra demand on your time. But really, I thank God for being so faithful and for being there and having to deal with infections in the family as well. That has been challenging. But yeah, we've managed to pull through. So just for me, it's really been concentrating on the positive. Thank you.
So yeah, for me it was also lockdown was really good for our team, and I think we were largely spared in rural areas. It was a very delayed response and a very muted response for COVID. So we mainly dealt with the socioeconomic impact of lockdown. But our rehab team approached the lockdown with a strategy of pause, regroup, reanalyze, re-strategize, implement, reflect, adapt. So we reevaluated all our priorities and objectives, and it got us to question whether we had been actually meeting these priorities and objectives with the old normal setup. And I don't think we had. I think we just like got caught up in, day after day, this is the way it's done, and gone on without question. And so we took a good hard look at inefficiencies in our services and how we were going to address them. We also needed to do a lot of team strengthening. And we needed to have some very difficult conversations, which were very positive. And we had to learn to be kinder to ourselves and to each other. We've had pretty fluctuating staffing levels as well, and the daily changes of the pandemic just got us to be more flexible, strengthen our communication, and just really work together closely as a team. So it's been really, really good. We also, by looking at our inefficiencies and our priorities and objectives, we decided to shift all of our moderate and severe disabilities across all of our programs to home-based care, and rather see them on home visits. So shifted all our clinic services to home, basically. And in order to do this, we needed to amalgamate 4 separate disability program databases, give a priority rating to each patient, upskill the various staff, use a transdisciplinary approach, and embed 2 of our rehab teams in the Institute's COVID outreach team. So in the end, we found that we could do a lot more with a lot less and do it better. We strengthened our health systems. We picked up people that had fallen through the cracks. And it taught us to be ever more thankful for strong community networks. And just going out on the daily home visits and asking the simple question of like, what's changed during lockdown? It's a simple question and it gives you such a massive answer. It just showed us the extent of the broken system and the inability to respond effectively in a crisis. So our team and the local spinal cord peer support organization engaged in fundraising for food parcels for a local faith-based organization, specifically to cover families without documentation, but also those that were in a dire crisis. Because food parcels came out so late and there was limited civil society response to it in rural areas. So the peer supporters that we work with also shifted their community services from home visits to telephonic because they were more at risk. And by doing that, they were able to successfully alert us about impending crises with disabled members in the community. And we averted a couple of readmissions as well, which was really good, like invest at grassroots. And as Lungi and Jenny said, I'm also just incredibly grateful and so much less stressed now that everyone has figured out how to use Zoom and isn't asking me to do a 10-hour round trip just to attend a 2-hour meeting that everyone else traveled for 30 minutes to get to. Like my stress levels are so much better, and you can just actually concentrate on doing your job properly. So yeah, I'm hoping that we can sustain these changes because they've been overall really positive.
Thank you so much to everyone for sharing. Um, This is our last question for today. What advice would you have for the young woman of today?
It's Jenny. I think we need to encourage women to be themselves. And I think, Mareka's sort of journey story illustrates that really beautifully, how, coming from, she studied overseas and she came back to an urban environment and now she's in a rural environment. So we need to encourage women to listen to their heart and to follow their dreams, and much what Pam says is to be adventurous and to see the world out there as it's an adventure. It's not something to be scared of, and women need to be themselves. So and I think that's a challenge, because we often study, well, we generally study in a quite a Western urban environment, and we need to learn then to be able to shift between the different sort of cultures and urban, peri-urban, rural, almost seamlessly. And I think that's the challenge, and it's also an opportunity. So we need to explain that to women and say that's the opportunity to go with. I think I would also say that people need to learn to listen to stories. They need to listen to stories of their patients, of their healthcare workers, even the stories of their lecturers, and they need to hear the heart of the story. And it's when you start to hear the heart of the story that you start to understand that person, that family, that community. And that's what we need to start doing more of, and not just trying to get answers from questions, which are often very sort of directed questions. We want to know about the cough, we want to know about the fever, whatever. And as soon as we start hearing the story, we're going to be able to learn more, and that's when we start to change. But we also start working in partnership. And so I think women need to realize that we naturally relational, we networking kind of people. We need to start viewing healthcare as a partnership. And how do we get people to buy into this partnership? And how do we change as well, so that we can offer the best advice, the best kind of healthcare for that community? It's not about coming in and saying we've got the answers. It's about trying to figure out how we're going to do this transaction. And that also means looking further and looking at farming methods and water and sanitation. And I was very humbled when I first arrived in Mr. To go with my husband, who's an agriculture engineer and was working with appropriate technology. And I'd just been on the ward round and saying women need to do sitz bars after they COVID, and going with my husband and finding out where the water is coming from. And communities are having to walk large distances and go sometimes into quite treacherous rivers and wells. I know that's changed now, but it suddenly made my recommendation seem so trite and so inappropriate to take 5 liters or 2 liters of freshly collected water for a sitz bath. So I think it's only as we start to interact that we can sort of give appropriate advice. We need to learn to step out of our comfort zones, not to be scared of change. And I think we need to value relationships. Women need to be told to value the relationships that they have around them, and not to as Mareka said, not to work in silos, but to cross those divides. And that might mean working with veterinary services and Department of Social Development, who we often have fairly strained relationships with, and education. And that's the beauty of rural networks. And that's what we need to strengthen and make sure that that's how we view a community is holistically and relationally. And women need to find those networks and trust their instincts to build bridges.
Okay, so for me, I think just like Jenny said, you have to know your identity initially. That needs to be your footing. So identity for me goes with spirituality as well. So whatever spirituality that you choose for yourself, I choose God because I've seen him walk with me, and I've seen how he can move mountains and open doors in front of you in faith. So have that, your identity, your faith, or spirituality. I would say do not allow others to shape you or your thoughts or your dreams. So when you are young, it can be very easy to have your ideas swayed. For instance, someone once asked me, so what are you doing in rural areas? You should own a mansion in Umhlanga. You are a doctor, don't allow other people to shape your thoughts and your ideas and your dreams. Listen to your voice. When you know who you are and you are comfortable with yourself, then you also become more comfortable listening to your own voice. Talk to yourself, laugh if you have to, cry if you have to. I have a habit where I used to look at myself in the mirror whenever I'm crying, and I would laugh at how ugly I would look when I'm crying. But during that session, it would be so therapeutic for me that I would actually then start talking to myself, looking at myself in the mirror. Who are you? Why are you crying? Why has this hurt you so much that you had to cry about it? And what are you going to do about it? So talk to yourself and learn to listen to your voice. Then the last thing for me is do not allow your background to determine your dreams and your destinations. I think it's evident that I grew up in a remote area, and as Jenny was saying just now, I used to walk with my mom for long distances to go fetch water, and fetch firewood and walk long distances. I remember when I was in high school, I used to walk for about an hour, and that would be like between 3 to 5 kilometers just to get to school. Jenny was saying, yes, the situation has changed now. Largely it has, but a large percentage of rural kids still go through the same situations almost every day of their lives. But did I let that background shape me? No. So my point is to not allow your background to shape your dreams. Do not allow your background to shape where your life is going to end up, because you can grow up in the middle of nowhere, but if you have your dreams set, you know who you are, you know where you want to go, and you've got God on your side, you can break boundaries. I often, when I'm reminiscing and I look at my life and I say, it's so amazing that out of this small area that no one knows about, like for everyone's information, whenever I went to varsity, no one knew where Mseleni was. I would have to explain myself over and over again about where is Mseleni whenever I would introduce myself. So I often look back now and I say, in the middle of nowhere, where no one knew where Mseleni was, no one knew about Mseleni, but God made me to then rise up and be just that little light and that little hope. So when you carry yourself into the future, also know that you're going to be an inspiration for somebody. So do not let your background shape you, because by you beating the odds, you can then become a mentor, a role model, or an inspiration, or even just that little glimmer of light in someone else's life. Thank you.
Thanks. I think everyone has taken my words, but yeah, I will echo what everyone said. Yeah, my advice really to young people young women is that your background does not determine your foreground. If you have a dream, live your dream and walk your dream, and do not allow your circumstance to limit you. And don't allow people to define you. Hence, otherwise they will less define you. They will define you as a duck whilst you are an eagle. Be like an eagle, stay focused and continue to fly high. You need to have a place and to know where you draw your strength from. Be yourself and keep on pushing and never give up on what you believe in. But it starts by knowing yourself and knowing what you want in life and also believing in yourself. I want to close with a verse in the Bible, 1 Timothy chapter 4, verse 12. It says, do not let anyone look down on you because you are young, but set an example for the believers in speech, in conduct, in love, in faith, and in purity. So I think that is very important. I always look back in my life. I had a speech delay. I probably started to make a full sentence at the age of 6, and I grew up in rural areas. I was a sickly little one, and in my culture, there's always this thing: if you are twins, saying that one twin will survive, one will die. I was probably the one that was defined as a twin that was not going to survive. And but looking at myself today, I can just say, I never allowed my background to limit me. And I'm here today because there were people who were behind me and who believed in me and who taught me to believe in myself. And yeah, you just need to be yourself and allow yourself to take a risk, and just walk your journey. And I promise you, you do that, you will succeed. You'll be what you want to be in life. Thanks.
Hey, so I think my first is going to be remember to advocate for the patient and not your profession. Use your privilege and advocate hard for those that are less fortunate and those who are being screwed by the system. Don't be scared to go against the grain. Remember that you can throw the most expensive surgery, most expensive drugs, and the best interventions at something. But if you haven't won the patient's heart and soul, you will fail. And that goes especially for spinal cord patients with pressure sores, mothers with kids with disabilities. Yeah. Again, like everyone has said, be clear about who you are, what you value, and what your measures of success are. Be honest to yourself and others at all times. Take joy in the success of others. Don't get caught up in the noise of society. There is a lot of noise. Surround yourself with positive people and try and get a mentor or a few mentors. It really makes a huge difference. Share your experiences, don't bottle it up. Support each other, stand up for one another, and know that it's okay to cry. And ask for feedback and supervision. Ask for help when you need it. Don't be scared to make mistakes or admit that you don't know. It's okay. We don't expect you to know everything all the time. No one does. Yeah, get involved, and not just within your profession. Go wider and pick your battles wisely.
Wow, that sadly brings us to the end of our conversation today. I honestly wish we could stay up for the rest of the evening, just talking and chatting and learning from each of you and all the wise words that you have to share.